You are listening to Insights from the Conference Board.
Welcome to this podcast. My name is John Metzelaar. I'm the co-leader of the Conference Board's Innovation and Digital Transformation Institute. I'm introducing here a new series called Learning to Lead Innovation, by learning from the best, from the chief technology and innovation officers from some of the best companies around the world. This episode of our new series resides in our Insights channel. The first episode is going to focus on that panacea, or that holy grail, I should say, of ambidextrous leadership. How do you go and perform successfully today while creating the future at the same time? And I'm absolutely thrilled that the person that we're going to go and get the lessons from, in fact, used to be my boss at P&G, and has recently retired as Chief R&D and Innovation Officer from the Procter & Gamble company, Kathy Fish. Kathy, a warm welcome to joining me in this podcast.
Hey, thanks for inviting me, John. It's really great to be here.
Fantastic. I look forward to a constructive, healthy, and fun conversation. Ambidextrous leadership, it's a heavy word, it's being used a lot these days. What does it mean to you? Why do you think it's so hot today?
Yeah, I mean, you set it up pretty well. If you are going to create a business that will sustain over the long run, you have to operate your core current business today while you're creating the future. And the reality of those is that both the work and the cultures required are very different. So people often make the mistake of treating them the same, and then they get into some trouble. So let me give a little more specifics. So for operating the core business or performing today, as you said it has to be all about value creation. Your current business is what pays the bills. If you don't have a healthy core business, it's really hard to create the future. You're going to bleed faster than you can bring new things in. Now, the good news is it's all about your core consumer and markets with platforms that you understand really, really well. So failure should be the exception. You should be able to be disciplined and just keep driving forward. Now, on the other hand, if you're working to create the future, you don't really know where you're going. And if you try to define it too tightly at the beginning, you're likely going to get way off track. So you have to have a culture of experimentation where you learn your way to where you should go. And as a result of that, failure has to be part of the learning process. The right answer isn't clear, so vigorous debate is healthy, it's good, it's important, and fast cycle learning is critical if you're going to get there. Sometimes people think creating the future is this creative exercise and not very disciplined, but that's not true. It's just that the discipline's very different. It should be focused on really understanding what problem you're going to solve and how you're going to make a difference in your consumers' lives. And what are the assumptions that you have so that you can go run your experiments to validate those assumptions?
Good.
So that's pretty much it. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
So ambidexterity really means being both-handed, right? And that's not easy for leaders. I continue to hear that this is one of the biggest challenges that they have, and frankly, you see it in the results of many businesses. The priorities should be different. The work is different, as you say. The expectations are different. And what I then see often is that leaders revert back to the safe haven of performing because that's what they've gotten used to over the years. But they're finding it more difficult to get to that transformation angle at the same time. How do you see that? Why is it so challenging? What's going on from a strategy viewpoint? What's maybe a tool that you've been using to go and address that?
Leaders sometimes think they need to be the best at everything, and really they don't. They just need to know what's important and make sure they have an organization that can be the best at everything. And so I think that's the challenge. Very few individuals are actually personally ambidextrous. It's very, very unusual. And leaders just need to be willing to say, okay, I'm not an expert at this, but I can rely on Kathy for creating the future because she's strong at that. So let me use her and leverage her as she goes. And then just know where the work that you're doing resides and run that appropriately with the right culture, make sure that they're investing in a strategy that's not just about winning today, but is willing to peel off some resources to invest in winning over the mid to long term. It's just so important. I know you know this, but the average Fortune 500 company today only lasts 18 years. That's down from 61 years in the late 1950s. It's dropped dramatically because people don't get this balance right between these two, and they have to figure it out.
So there is this sort of gravity that keeps companies doing the same thing they've been doing all along. I know there's a tool that you and I both are very fond of that should help the SCurve. You want to speak to that?
Absolutely. So when we were trying to diagnose how we had gotten off track at Procter & Gamble, we went to do a study of the success factors behind our billion-dollar brands. And out of that study came that we should use the concept of an S-curve because all of our billion-dollar brands had been created behind a breakthrough technology that really elevated the standard in the industry. And as a result, created competitive advantage for us so that we could drive value creation over a 5 to 10 year period, sometimes even up to 20 years. And our value creation model then became the area under the S-curve. How long could you run it? How high could you drive it? And it's a great strategic tool for leaders to think through what the activity system should be on their brand. So just to bring it to life a little bit, the first phase is creating the S-curve. It's incredibly heavy lifting, which is why it's hard for people to do. There's a lot of R&D that goes into it. For us, it takes 5 to 10 years on average to create an S-curve for our businesses. That's a lot of R&D. Then when you have it, you got to invest all the capital to build it. And then when you're ready, you got to invest all the marketing to launch it. Huge investment, a lot of risk involved in that. But then when you get it right, if you really have something that has elevated the standard in the industry and is delighting your consumer, you run through this ascent phase of the S-curve, which is a beautiful place to be. You're able to drive trial of the product really broadly, which drives growth of your brand. You're able to learn about your new technology platform in a way that brings costs out. So you're growing, you're getting more profitable. And the funny thing about being in the ascent phase is our leaders often think, wow, this is awesome. And I never want to change anything. This is working so well. We just need to keep running the same play over and over and over again. But unfortunately, eventually competition does catch up. Your margin of competitive advantage is reduced and your growth slows as a result of that. And so you move into a maturity phase on an S-curve. And people start to get nervous in the maturity phase. And unfortunately, when they get nervous, they tend to double down on activity, try to do more faster. And there's just not that much value left to be had. They would be much better off to put those resources back into either extending their level of competitive advantage so they can stay in the ascent phase or creating a whole new S-curve to really elevate the standard again. And if they stay in that maturity phase too long, it leads to stagnation and growth declines, and it's a really miserable place to be.
Yeah, and that happens often. I love the word when you said it's a beautiful space to be. It's a beautiful place to be. The ascent phase. In fact, it's so beautiful that many leaders and corporations get complacent, right? And they lean back and they smoke the cigars and they smash each other on the shoulders on how smart and how good and intelligent they are. They're the best lead team the world's ever seen.
Exactly.
But it remains an S-curve, folks. That steep part of the slope doesn't happen forever. Empires live in S-curve. Businesses live in S-curve. Products and services live in S-curve. So indeed,
I think I'll just add our learning has been that if you're not investing in the next S-curve while you're in that ascent phase, while things are really good, you're going to get into trouble because once you're in the maturity phase, if it takes you 5 to 10 years to create the next one, you're going to have several years that are not very much fun.
That's where I wanted to go. So you and I have been working too long together. So excellent. We are in violent agreement. What are what are the activities, what are the priorities, what are the interventions that you need to
Yeah.
do to go and be successful and
Yeah.
take your perform also into transform.
Yeah. So let me just say one thing before I go into our overall strategy. One of the hows is you have to just realize that you always need to be investing in the future, and you need to think about your investment, depending on your business, who your competitors are, what level of investment that requires. For us, we decided it was somewhere between 15 and 25, maybe even 30% of our R&D investment needed to be in creating the future. And we needed to ring fence that and protect it, so that, because if today's crisis will always pull you in, and you need some individuals who are just solely focused on creating the future, but yet are connected to the core business. So as we said, okay, how do we make sure that we are always creating the future, constructively disrupting ourselves? We decided there were 5 critical interventions that we as an organization needed to do. And I will just list them very quickly, and then we can go through them individually if you'd like to do that.
Yes, let's.
The first one was elevating our standard to create a truly irresistible consumer experience, holistically crafted across all the touch points that the consumer experiences. So functional performance was the foundation, but it was not sufficient. We needed to bring it together in a delightful way so when the consumer uses the product, it's hard to go back to what they were using before. The second one is to be more forward-looking. If you're going to be the innovation leader in the categories in which you compete, you have to go where the puck is moving. And, again, things take time, so you have to be looking 5 years down the road to be able to do that. Third is, how do we get more agile and experimental so that we can improve our speed, first of learning and then of bringing big things to the market, not anything to the market, big things. And then fourth, obviously, digital is transforming everything. So how do we leverage digital to solve problems we couldn't solve otherwise and improve the consumer experience? And then last but not least is just recognizing that there are so many great resources externally. How do we fully capture those resources through open innovation in a way that strengthens our program?
5 key points, and your umbrella was called Innovating the Way We Innovate, which I think is a nice description of bringing those 5 together. So let's indeed, as you suggest.
Yeah. Let me say, I love that. For us,
yeah, because you
innovating
designed
how we
it.
innovated. Well, no, it's actually somebody else did. Somebody else came up with the tagline, but it really is pushing our R&D organization to say we always need to be thinking about how we can be better. Very important, right?
Yep, absolutely. Always going for the next frontier. So let's talk about the first frontier here, which is how do you take performance to experience? That must not be easy when you have an R&D organization who's been focusing for, frankly, since donkey years on performance. What did it take?
Yeah, again, if you look at the history behind our billion-dollar brands, they were all superior in functional performance. So we're all, we are committed to that, and we've recommitted to it's not enough to be better than our competition. We have to be so much better that when they use our product, they really miss it, and they're willing to pay a little more, and they're very loyal to it. They're not going to go back to what they were using before. And we did, that level of functional performance is the foundation, but holistically crafting it. So we brought innovation designers in, industrial designers in to really help us think about how to bring design into our products in a consistent basis. And then as we did that, we partnered with marketing as well to say, how do we make every touch point holistic? So how does the package bring the product to life, and how do we make that superior? How do we communicate to the consumer in a surprisingly obvious way so they understand right away what this product's going to do for them and they want to try it? How do we show up in retail, both either in store or online? Big investment there. And how do we make that congruent with everything else? And how do we make sure that our value equation is right? So hitting on all those touch points was really critical.
So, Kathy, that sounds great, obviously. But how did you convince the business community to invest? I guess those things don't come for free.
Yeah, it was interesting when we first started on this irresistible superiority journey. First of all, people thought it was just a cute phrase. but it really wasn't. It was there intentionally. Irresistible means was signaling making an emotional connection. So we finally got that through. But then came the investment phase, and we couldn't just go full speed ahead. Even though we had a lot of data to say that historically that's what's driven our success, people wanted to see that that would be true in today's world. So the way we did it was we ran experiments. We're a big company. We're in a lot of markets. In fabric care, for example, our first experiments were in the Philippines. Relatively small market. We invested in the product in a really meaningful way. We found that it grew the category, and we grew 2.5 share points almost immediately. Even though it was a very significant investment, it paid out totally. And we got more and more sophisticated over time in our ability to measure that it was also driving loyalty, and consumers were using more when they used the product because they liked it better. They were more likely to buy it the next time. And so that investment was very worthwhile. But you have to bring data to prove it.
So even there, you start already to live what I know you're going to get to eventually is experimentation, right? You experimented a bit in one market, you learned a lot, and then once you got it right, you scaled around the world. You applied the concept in a much broader sense. So
exactly,
excellent. And then, so the most visible maybe illustration of how this works, obviously, has been Tide Pods, right? I know you've been obviously in your previous role, you've been very, very closely involved in this. I want to speak a bit to how you deliver this and maybe of the recent results, which are quite impressive.
Yeah. So on pods, we had been working on unit dose for years, and we'd had some modest success and some failure. And then Cascade got it right for auto dish, and that was great. And so we continued to work on Tide Pods. So very complex technical platform. Again, it's one that took us 10 years. Yeah. But as we were learning, we knew that it wasn't enough just to have the convenience of a unit dose. We knew we needed to build in superior performance. And we also knew that we needed to be forward looking. As we did that, we needed to be building in where the consumer was going. So Tide has always been all about the very best in clean. And we had defined that on the torture test of stain removal. And that's where we put the large focus of our organization. And we realized that we really needed to redefine clean to be relevant to the consumer today. And that stains were still important, but malodor was emerging as a huge issue as wash temperatures were going lower, more synthetic fabrics were being used, particularly for athletic wear. It's now as big an issue as stain removal. So we put a big focus on malodor. We put a big focus on bright colors and whites, not just bright whites, because a lot of clothes have both components to it. We put a lot of focus on sustainability and how do we give this superior performance in high efficiency machines where you have lower energy levels, lower temperature levels, it's cold water and it's low water. And it's much harder to clean in those environments, but it's a huge benefit for the environment and really important to our consumers. So we put focus on all of those, and we built them into this beautiful multi-compartment pod that gave superior performance because you could separate chemistry and was so easy and convenient to use. It would handle most consumers' washing needs. And when we launched, people loved it because it was beautiful, because it worked so well, because it let them delegate the laundry to their kids and their husband, and it still came out beautifully well. So it was really elevating the standard in the category in a meaningful way. And what resulted from that is pods are driving the majority of category growth in the fabric care business. We own about a 75 share of it. It's been really healthy for us and, great for the consumer as well.
75% of the segment of the future that's growing. That's a pretty neat place to be. I guess many people will be envious. Many leaders will be envious of that position. Talking the future, let's move to the second component of your program, which is the forward-looking. What does it mean? How have you lived it?
So I think anytime your business is in crisis, people put their head down and try to survive today. And, that's very understandable. It's really hard. But if you're going to be the innovation leader, technology is opening up a lot of possibilities. It's changing consumers' lives. It's creating new tensions in their lives. And we have to look at where things are going. And particularly if our innovation is going to take 5 years to create, we need to be looking 5 years down the road and really getting on the path. Back to the SCurve concept, a lot of times the things that are further in the future start small and start to build, and then they take off. And if you're waiting to see whether it's really going to take off or not before you get in, you can't, by definition, you can't be the innovation leader. You're not on the leading edge. So, we saw that we were putting our head down when we got into some difficulties. So we decided we needed to step back and look at the forward-looking consumer scenarios, both demographically, technology-based, and things like Uber urbanization. People were moving to urban communities, and it was changing things. And we spent time to do that, and we came up with scenarios that we felt like every business should think about for their business, and they should decide what were the grand challenges where they wanted to invest resources and go start the learning process. And that's just been really critical to us getting back on the leading edge.
So it's really identifying what trends are going on at the consumer level, at societal level, and at technological level, and really tapping into those.
It's not that difficult. It just is an investment you need to make, and the investment then on what does that mean for my business and what I need to go do about it. So, you think about the aging demographic, the Chinese middle class. You think about the advances in biotechnology, the advances in digital. They're all things that we know are there, but you have to spend the time to think about what impact are they going to have.
It's not only investing though; it's also committing to them, right? It's not
Committing
only
as well.
seeing around corners, but also acting around corners on the action.
Absolutely.
On the
Absolutely.
action. Let's move into the third component of your program. Accelerate speed and quality of learning. I know you've been inspired by the lean startup already many years ago. How have you taken that and really brought it into what I know is a huge challenge, bringing it into such a large corporation that people all around the world live it?
Yeah, our goal was not to walk away from who we were. We have tremendous strengths in consumer understanding and scaling, and I can go on. But it was to add some of the strengths of the startup community to that. So entrepreneurship, agility, speed of learning. And, yes, we were inspired by the lean innovation, by Steve Blank, Eric Ries, real leaders. And we hired them as consultants. It was very powerful. But the hard part is, how do you actually bring that into a company like P&G? And how do you actually action it? So that was the challenge. We decided that, really driven by David Taylor, that we weren't going to be a top-down push that we had to do this, that we were going to let our leaders decide how they wanted to implement it. And we were going to have a central organization that enabled progress in the business units by learning from the best externally, by creating a network to learn from each other internally, and by building capabilities to get people going that were very challenging. So, and then we let the business units start running their experiments. And, if you look at entrepreneurship first and foremost, where you want to create consumer love by falling in love with their problems and then creating a solution through minimum viable prototypes initially that you learn fast on, and then you pivot and you make it better and you keep going. As we did that work, there were some major challenges for us. First of all, we wanted those teams to be multifunctional and fully dedicated, neither one of which we typically did this early in the process. So that was hard. How do we get both the commercial and the technical community and how do we get people fully dedicated? We also found it very challenging to not jump to the solution, but really spend the time that we needed to get super clear on the problem and make sure if we solved it, it was going to be really meaningful to our consumer. We learned that what we thought was fast and cheap was still slow and expensive, and we could move much faster if we got really clear on our assumptions and tested them the best way. We learned that our systems didn't support fast cycle learning. We couldn't take a credit card for transactional learning, for example, very simple example. So we had to invest in the capability to do it. We learned that it's hard to kill your ideas. So, our goal still is, how do you kill good ideas so that you can focus on great ideas? Because those great ideas are the ones that are going to lead to your next billion-dollar business. And so that's all been a journey for us that has been very important.
Now, many leaders are trying to have their organization become lean. Now go and become lean. The only problem is that one of the key interventions here need to be the role of leadership, right? It requires a very different role of leadership. You want to speak a bit to that?
Yeah, so leaders got to where they are because they're really smart people who know how to direct an organization to do what needs to be done. That's what they're comfortable doing on average. And it's hard to say that you don't know, but my whole premise has been, in today's world, it's changing so fast. It's impossible for any leader to know everything.
Correct.
Right? And so what lean does for you is the leadership now needs to be sort of retrained to think about how to support the entrepreneurial teams that they've created. Let them own their space, let them run in their space, and support them appropriately. And you can do that because you're starting really small. So the risk, financial risk or anything else, is so small, it's very, very manageable. But the leader needs to learn how to support. And we found this very simple approach of bringing the teams in and deciding if you're going to fund them or not by asking them, what have they learned? How do they know? What do they need to learn next? And what help do they need? Very powerful conversations.
Excellent. So, can you give an illustration of where has it led to, Kathy? I'm sure you have some potent new initiatives coming out from all this work.
Yeah, we have a portfolio of 183 experiments that we're really excited about, and we've launched several. But let me just tell you about one. The natural space is a very important grand challenge for us. It's a big innovation challenge because consumers want it, yet it tends to be a trade-off in performance and cost. So one of the areas that we invested in our new business organization was Zevo. And Zevo is a non-toxic insect control competing against Raid, and it kills insects as fast as Raid without being harmful to humans or pets. Very exciting. And we started that through lean innovation. We started in a couple of stores at Home Depot to see how well it sold off the shelf. And then we expanded to Home Depot and Target. And now we're much more broadly out in the market, and it's doing extremely well.
Excellent. So the other thing that I want to move into next is the thing on digital. I know that many of the old industry manufacturing companies find it hard to embrace digital. How have you succeeded?
Well, I mean, we've embraced it. We've made a huge investment in digital. It's been a lot of heavy lifting. And I think what we've learned along the journey is we need to really start with solving problems that we could not solve physically through these tools, because then people get really excited about it and they're willing to do the heavy lifting that's required to get there. And after they do that, we'll be able to apply it across our business. So that's going to help us with the speed and the quality of our learning pre-market. But we also wanted to say, how do we use digital to help us improve the experience for the consumer in a much more holistic way? And given the cost of technology, that's not a no-brainer for our industries. We're really proud to say that we've found some spaces where it's making a big difference. We went to the Consumer Electronics Show in 2019, and we took several products. And our focus there was to show, it's not natural for P&G to be at a tech show. We're not a tech company. But our unique point of difference is that we were focused on the experience. And we said, for us, CES stands for Consumer Experience Show. So that's where we focused. And we've come up with several products that won awards, and are building our business. Oral-B IO is the most recent one, a smart and connected toothbrush that improves oral health habits, which is awesome.
P&G winning awards at CES, it's a whole new world. Congrats, that's a major achievement. I
Thanks. And
know.
again, yeah, these are spaces that are going to start small and build over time, but you have to get on the leading edge.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now I know that one of the helps here has been our prowess in open innovation, right? This
Yeah.
has been interesting since I left P&G now 6-7 years ago. Every time I go to a speech and somebody brings up open innovation, they immediately refer to P&G. So we have an enormous credentials in that space. I'm sure you've taken that to new levels.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
your fifth. That's your fifth component, right? So
Yeah, our
what are you doing?
credentials, started with, admitting that there's lots of smart people out there and we need to leverage them. And
Right.
we built strategic relationships with universities and suppliers that have served us really, really well. But we felt like we needed to step change it. And, both by really leveraging the startup community, which is super hard. I mean, there's so many startups, right? There's a lot of noise out there. So how do you effectively leverage the startup community? And we found by putting out, being open, putting out strategic briefs on what it was we needed, we got a lot of richness back from the startup community, and we're continuing to work to build on that. We also embrace that we're an excellent material science company, and there are technologies that we invent that can be leveraged more broadly in the industry, and that we can get an income stream off of that. And use that to reinvest back in innovation. So that's our external value creation program. A great example is one of our young scientists invented the ability to recycle polypropylene to a virgin quality, virgin cost. And that's just much bigger. It's a great tool in the plastics challenge that we all have. So we're working with a partner to industrialize and commercialize. And it's, I think that's just the right way to do it. And again, we're getting an income stream off of that we can leverage broadly.
That's wonderful. So that completes the roundup. I just want to go and summarize the 5 components of your program for our listeners. Make sure that we are offering up what the Conference Board promises: actionable, tangible insights. 1, performance to irresistible consumer experience. 2, looking ahead and leverage trends more intentionally, investing in them and committing to them. A more forward-looking approach. 3, becoming a faster, agile learning organization that leads forward through experimentation. And as you highlighted, the role of leadership is absolutely fundamental there and needs to flip to support instead of telling people what to do. Number 4 is starting to learn about digital tools, not only internally by making your processes better, but also applying them at the consumer dimension, and that leads already to awards. Again, compliments. And then number 5 is being very holistic and very intentional about continuing to build your open innovation expertise and pulling the benefits from it. Also, when there's more and more operations happening within ecosystems. So that's a really wonderful summation. Thank you. I've been listening intently. And I will let you go and maybe finish off our conversation, your talk with the results. We all know that from a distance we've seen good results at P&G. You want to speak a bit more precisely to
I would
illustrate?
say after 10 years of underperformance, and the last several where we were growing 1% to 2%, 4 years ago we really got on a good path. And I would say 5 years ago we got on a good path, but it was 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But then we started hitting on all cylinders. So this year we grew 6%, which is outstanding in a business our size. It's over $4 billion of growth, a huge jump from 1% to 2%. And importantly, during that struggling time, we were consistently losing share. And now we are consistently growing markets and gaining share in those markets. So very healthy place to be. I know that while I was still at P&G and then just watching closely, I think the leadership's really proud of how this agility has transitioned to being able to handle the challenges that have come out of COVID. So, the great news about everything we've learned is a lot of it can help you be more agile in your core business as well. A little bit different level of discipline, but really terrific. So we're excited about the strength of the company going forward and what's to come.
Kathy Fish, what a wonderful way to reconnect with you after several years. Thank you so much for your insights, for our conversation, and for sharing your wisdom for the younger people in organizations that are looking to learn how to lead innovation. Thank you very much. And let's stay in touch.
Thank you.
So thank you to the listeners. If you enjoyed this episode from the Insights channel, please make sure you subscribe to it because there is much more coming. As I told you, this is the first in a series of learning to lead innovation. And we have our next one already lined up, but I won't spoil the beans here yet. More to come soon. Thank you very much for listening. Bye, everyone. Thanks again, Kathy.
This has been Insights from the Conference Board.